Hello, Jam and Thrive, kids and parents. Thank you for joining me for part 3 of the Winds of Redvale. I can't wait to find out what happens to the Perez family as we continue this adventure. This is the Red Letter Challenge for kids. So get on your pajamas, grab a stuffed animal, grab a blanket, get comfy, and we're going to read this story together. Part 3. Malachi led Aiden, Isabella, Emily, Red, and Melchor, the camel, deeper into the desert until they were completely surrounded by sand. It was like being on the ocean with no idea which direction to go. Except Malachi always acted like he knew. Aiden noticed that Malachi kept stopping to pull a dusty book from his pouch and flip through the pages. "What's with the book?" Aiden asked. "It's my big wilderness guidebook," Malachi said. "It contains tips on how to cross this desert alive. It'll also help us when we go through other wildernesses we're going to face." "Hold on a sec. Other wildernesses?" Red said. "You mean this desert isn't all we have to cross?" Aiden asked. "After we cross the Red Desert, we climb the Crimson Mountain." "Mountain?" Emily said. "Did I mention the swamp?" "Swamp?" "And then the Scarlet Sea." Dead silence. "Are you finished yet?" Red asked. Malachi flipped through the book. Yes, I think that's about it." Aiden's stomach lurched. "But don't worry," Malachi said. "The book is loaded with maps, and with the right map, you can find the right way." Then he pointed to the far horizon and added, "We go this way." "I sure hope he knows what he's doing," Aiden whispered to Red. "Do you know if he's going in the right direction?" "I do, and he is." "But how do you know?" "Because he's going where I'm following," the fox said. Aiden scratched his head. That didn't make much sense, but he couldn't turn back at this point. So he too followed, trudging across the parched land and pausing only to glug water from a canteen. Soon they reached a stretch of desert with high rolling dunes, and they could see the hazy outline of a mountain in the distance. Aiden suddenly had the urge to race someone up the dune. "Last one at the top is a rotten egg," he shouted, taking off running. "A rotten egg? I don't want to turn into a rotten egg." So Red took off like a bolt of lightning. Aiden quickly learned it's impossible to beat a fox in a race, and Red reached the top of the sand dune long before he did. Red looked puzzled as Aiden reached the top, breathing hard. "You didn't turn into a rotten egg," he said, as if disappointed. "It's just an expression," Aiden said. "It means I lost. You won." And Aiden hated to lose. As he caught his breath, he looked out across the desert and saw the most beautiful thing. Horses! Hundreds of horses raced across the desert. Horses of all colors, like a running rainbow. "Come and look," Aiden shouted to the others, who were still climbing the dune. "Beautiful horses." At the word horses, Malachi's eyes went wide. He sprinted up the dune. "Aren't they beautiful?" Aiden said as the horses swept across the land. "Quick, follow me," Malachi said. "Those aren't horses. Those are the destroyers." Red fainted on the spot. The horses looked so beautiful that Emily couldn't believe they were destroyers. She loved horses. She once asked her parents if they could buy her one, and she tried to tell them they could keep it in the garage. Her parents were not convinced. Now before her eyes, over 100 gorgeous horses thundered across the land, shaking the desert. Suddenly, the horses turned as a group and raced in their direction. But even more terrifying, the horses all changed into sand. They still looked like horses, only made out of sand. "Sand stallions," Malachi shouted, yanking Emily by the arm and pulling her down from the top of the dune. He led them back to their camel and unhooked a coil of rope from the saddle. "Everyone hold on to this rope so we don't lose contact with each other." Emily and the others did as Malachi told them, and then the camel knelt down. The animal created a barrier against the scorching wind and sand. "Hold tight to the rope and press yourself against the camel," Malachi ordered. "Will Melchor be all right?" Emily asked. She flattened herself against the camel's warm body. "Thank you for asking, Emily," said the camel, "but we camels are made from sandy places. Our long eyelashes keep out the sand, and we can even close our nostrils to keep sand out of our nose." "Cool," said Aiden. "Everyone be ready," Malachi said. "They're almost here." Emily's heart started thumping wildly, like horse hooves. She heard the stallions getting closer and closer, a stampede of sand. Then they struck. In an instant, the sky was nothing but sand. The stallions crashed against them in wave after wave of galloping sand, blotting out the sun. Melchior's body kept most of the sand from hitting them directly, but Emily still felt hundreds of particles pelt her face. It felt like needles hitting her. She closed her eyes tightly and held her nose. With her other hand, she gripped the rope tightly. "Pray!" Malachi shouted. His voice sounded so far away. "Pray with all your might." The wind kept getting fiercer, and Emily felt it trying to peel her away from the camel's side. She let go of her nose and used 2 hands to hold the rope. The rope was her only link to safety. Suddenly, the wind began to die down, and Emily was relieved. The worst seemed to be over, so she relaxed her grip on the rope. "Emily, don't let go," Isabella shouted. But it was too late. The savage wind returned, twice as strong as ever. It yanked Emily loose from the rope, and she flung through the air, which filled with swirling sand. "Help me! Emily!" Isabella was only 2 feet from Emily when her little sister was blown away. She tried to reach out with one free hand, but Emily was gone. "I gotta save her," Emily shouted, her panic rising with the wind. She was the oldest, and she vowed to keep her little brother and sister both safe, but she had failed. "Keep holding on to the rope. We'll move as a group," Malachi shouted. Isabella couldn't see Malachi, but his voice came to her through the slanting shower of sand. They all stepped away from the protection of the camel, still holding the rope. The wind was so strong that Isabella had to grip the lifeline with all her strength to keep from being blown away. The sand was getting deeper and deeper, moving up to Isabella's calves, making it difficult to walk. She prayed to God the sand wouldn't bury Emily. "Emily!" Aiden shouted. "Emily! Emily!" All of them called her name, and Melchior followed behind, trying to shield them from the wind as best he could. Then, "Help me, God!" It was Emily's small voice. It seemed to be coming from the right, so they moved as one in that direction. "We're coming, Emily!" Soon the sand and wind let up just enough that they saw the shadow of a girl about 12 feet away. Emily was buried in sand up to her waist, but she was safe. Thank God. She was safe. Isabella and Aiden wrapped her in their arms, and so did Red and Malachi. The sand stallions galloped off into the distance and vanished on the horizon. The storm was over. The kids spent the next half hour brushing sand off their bodies. Isabella had never felt so relieved in her entire life. "God answered our prayers," Malachi said as he turned his gym shoe upside down. A never-ending stream poured out. "Let's worship him now." Isabella shook the sand from her head of thick black hair. "Worship? I don't really feel like singing." "I think I swallowed too much sand to sing," said Red. "Who's talking about singing?" Malachi said. "But you just said we should worship God," Aiden pointed out. "Singing is one way to worship, but it's not the only way. Worship is giving glory and praise to God, but it doesn't have to be through song. You can thank God any time of the day." "You mean if I give thanks to God for rescuing Emily, that's worship?" Isabella asked. "No singing?" "You can sing if you want, but you definitely do not have to." "No, don't let her sing," Aiden suddenly blurted out. Isabella and Aiden broke out laughing because they both knew full well she was a horrible singer. Her voice could make paint blister. Isabella put her arms around her brother and sister, drew them close, and silently breathed her thanks to God. She felt the glory rising like sparks from a campfire, and she knew without a doubt that this was exactly what Malachi was talking about. But the good feelings didn't last. 20 minutes later, Isabella found herself sitting beneath a scrawny desert plant, trying to keep her mind from buzzing with angry thoughts. This was crazy, she told herself. With the sand stallions gone, Malachi suggested that everyone take time to be alone with God. He said he needed to think and pray and rest before they continued. So Malachi just walked off into the distance, plopped down on a sand dune, and began to flip through his big wilderness guidebook. Isabella thought it was kind of weird, but she went ahead anyway and found a spot where she tried to pray and ponder. She really tried, but whenever her mind wasn't busy these days, she always seemed to think about the recent falling out with her best friend, Hannah. A few weeks before Isabella's family moved away, Hannah suddenly stopped talking to her. Hannah would pass her in the hall and not even glance in her direction. But even worse, Hannah started hanging out with an entirely new set of friends. "Hannah, what's with you?" Isabella had shouted one day when she had spotted her friend walking home from the bus stop. Hannah tried to speed up, but Isabella wasn't going to let her get away. "I'm going to keep at you until you answer me." Finally, Hannah came to a sudden stop, turned around and glared. Answer you about what? You know what I'm talking about. You're ignoring me. Your best friend. Best friend? A best friend doesn't desert the other. Moving away is not my choice, exclaimed Isabella. I can't stop my family from moving. I want to stay here. But you never once said you're sorry. Sorry for what? You're the one who's rejecting me. You're the one hanging out with new friends. You should tell me you're sorry for moving, Hannah said. And you should tell me you're sorry for hanging out with Maria and her friends. Why should I be sorry? You're leaving, and I need new friends. But I'm not even gone yet. We can still be friends. Really? I don't think so. Then Hannah turned and stalked off. Isabella still remembered how she had bolted for home that day because she wasn't going to let Hannah see her cry. She ran as fast as she could, blinking away the tears. The argument with Hannah was all Isabella could think about as she sat on the sand dune hugging her knees. Even now, she couldn't keep the tears from coming. Why did Malachi have to suggest they take time to be by themselves? She needed to escape her angry thoughts, but she couldn't stop fretting about Hannah. As they took off hiking once again, trudging across the thirsty land, Isabella muttered, "Does this desert ever end?" But no one seemed to be listening. The desert was red hot, like strolling through an oven. Aiden could see a mountain looming in the distance, but it seemed so far away. He wished he had his baseball hat to shade his eyes, but he had tossed his hat in the garbage the week before this adventure began. Aiden didn't think he was ever going to play baseball again because of what had happened on the field. Have you ever thought about giving up video games for a short time? Malachi said, suddenly appearing at Aiden's side as if he sprouted from the ground. He had a way of doing that. Huh? Why would I give up video games? If you fast from video games, you can spend the time connecting with God. Fast from video games, Aiden said. I thought fasting meant giving up food. You can fast from anything. Food, sugary drinks, candy, or video games. No thanks. Aiden glanced over at Malachi and could see him staring at him intensely. You know, you've been playing a lot more video games than normal the past week before coming to Redvale, Malachi noted. I have not, he lied. I know what happened in your baseball game, Malachi said, and I understand how upset you are, but hiding in your house, playing video games all day, is not the answer. Nothing happened, Aiden gripped. But he knew that wasn't true. How could he forget his worst day ever on the baseball field? It was bad enough that he struck out 3 times and made 2 errors in the field. Frankie, a kid from his school, made it 10 times worse. Hey, Mr. Miami, maybe you'd be better off playing t-ball, Frankie had taunted him on that terrible day. Frankie played for the other team, and he stood smirking on second base. Aiden had tried to ignore him. Aiden was playing second base, even though he played shortstop when he lived near Miami. Everyone knew you put your best player at shortstop, and Aiden had always been his team's best fielder and hitter. But now he was living in a new place, and he had to prove himself all over again. This was his first game on the new team, and it wasn't working out so well. He was trying too hard, and he knew it. Don't they throw curveballs in Miami? Frankie said. Maybe that's your problem. You've never seen a curve before. Frankie was trying to get him mad, and he was succeeding. Aiden wished he could forget what happened next. Crack! The next batter smacked a hard ground ball in Aiden's direction. It looked like an easy grounder, straight at him, hugging the ground. He crouched down, ready to vacuum up the ball when it went right through his legs. He heard Frankie laughing all the way to home plate. After that game, Aiden wanted to quit baseball forever. You're a good player, Malachi said. If you keep at it, you'll relax and get back to form. You might even learn something from your mistakes. Aiden shrugged. In a video game, if you get beat in a level, you start again, Malachi said. You don't give up. Yeah, but in video games, my mistakes aren't seen by everyone. True. You don't have an audience, like in baseball. I'll think about cutting back on video games, Aiden said. But he knew he probably wouldn't. A village! I see a village! Red suddenly shouted. At last, Aiden thought. They had reached the end of this wretched desert. They entered the village of Ruby Run just before dark, and Malachi said it was time to celebrate. They had passed through the first wilderness. In Ruby Run, people treated them like princes and princesses, which Emily loved. They all sat down at a long table at the front of the room, where people brought them heaps of delicious food. Even the vegetables tasted good, she marveled. You know, God loves to throw a party, Malachi whispered in Emily's ear, and everyone is invited. Everybody. Did Malachi know what had happened to her? Emily wondered. The way he said, everyone is invited, made her think he knew what had happened to her just a few days ago at school. It made Emily angry just thinking about how the other girls in her class had looked at her when they had passed her in the school hallway. Most of them carried a special invitation on top of their books, as if to make sure Emily could see it. Every single girl in her class seemed to have an invitation to Marianne's birthday party, except for her. Emily always found it easy to make friends. Back in Miami, she was usually the center of attention, and everybody loved her. When the family moved, Emily started making friends at her new school on the very first day, but then Marianne Palmer happened. Before Emily arrived, Marianne had been the class's most popular girl, the queen bee. But bees sting, and so does Marianne Palmer. She began to tell girls they had to choose between her and Emily. They couldn't be friends with both of them. With Marianne's birthday party quickly approaching, none of the girls wanted to be left out, so they chose Marianne. But then one day, as Emily trudged through the school, Marianne suddenly stepped in front of her, smiling. That was strange. Marianne was grinning at her. Emily, I almost forgot. This is for you, Marianne chirped. Then she did the most shocking thing. Marianne handed Emily an envelope. Was she invited after all? Thanks! Later, when she was alone, Emily ripped open the envelope, and she nearly exploded. Written across the note were these words. Sorry, Emily, but I wouldn't invite you to my party if you were the last person on earth. Emily tore it to pieces. Why did Malachi have to remind her about Marianne and her lousy party? It made it difficult to enjoy their celebration in Ruby Run. Emily moped and muttered until Red stood up on a chair and began to sing. Oh, happy day, when Jesus washed my sins away. He taught me how to watch and pray and live rejoicing every day. Oh, happy day, when Jesus washed my sins away. Listening to Red sing brought a smile to Emily, and if you've ever heard a fox sing, you too will know how good they are at making you forget your troubles. While everyone else continued to sing, Emily wandered outside and stared up at the crimson mountain, a hulking shadow in the dark. Tomorrow they would begin their climb up the mountain. Make it a happy day, she said aloud. Teach me how to watch and pray. And how to live rejoicing every day, said Red, stepping up beside her and taking her hand. The mountain was waiting. And that is the end of part 3. I hope you will join me tomorrow night to read a little bit more of this story together. Sleep well. Bye.